Okay, 4 o'clock rock. Here we are with Aging with Grace, one of my favorite shows. And our guest today is Bruce Bortorff. He's the Assistant State Director of Communications for AARP Hawaii. Welcome to the show, Bruce.
Thank you, Jay. Nice to be here.
Great to have you. We're calling this AARP Working for You. But before we get to AARP, let's find out about you. You're the Communications Associate State Director of Communications for AARP. What does that entail?
Well, I oversee all the communications. I'm essentially the Director of Communications for this large organization that has a very substantial presence here in Hawaii. We have 150,000 members across the state. These are folks.
Substantial percentage.
That's right. AARP is a membership organization for people above the age of 50. And as a result, I'm involved in not only media relations, but also member relations and communicating with a vast number of volunteers who are the heart and soul of what we do here.
Okay, I want to find out exactly what it is, but first I want to find out how I can get your job. What did you do to get into this job?
Well,
Give me a life bio.
It's not something that is easily told, but I'll try to make this as concise as possible. I came to Hawaii in 1975. I came from a somewhat international family. My father was an administrator with the International School Association. I went to school in Bangkok, Berlin. Wow. I ended up in Saigon this will be a memorable year for many of your viewers, 1974, 1975. I was there in April of 1975, and my father and I, who was at that point the director of the American schools, Saigon, we left the country and we came back to the United States, but rather than end up in New Jersey, which is his home, we came to Hawaii. So that was about 41 years ago. I made it a home here. My father ended up working for the state. He's now passed away. But I ended up going to the University of Hawaii, where I majored in journalism, got a job with Hawaii Business Magazine back in the 1980s, ended up teaching at a number of institutions locally here. And then after going back to school in the 90s and getting some graduate education, I ended up in 1999 working in the governor's office for Governor Cayetano, writing and doing communications, some speech writing and so forth. Crossed the street and wrote quite a bit for then Mayor Harris. And when his administration ended, I ended up briefly at the East-West Center in Public Affairs. And then in 2005, I was very, very fortunate to be invited to join the AARP Hawaii team at, I think, a very exciting time for anyone who is not only 50 and older, but approaching the age of 50 and older, given the significance that this age group has right now at this point in time in our local and state and national history.
So what does a communications director do for AARP? How do you spend your days?
Well, right now, of course, we're in the middle of the legislative session, so I am deeply involved in communicating to the public, as well as our members and anyone who may be interested in the issues that affect the elderly in Hawaii, communicating and clarifying for them the importance of the issues, articulating them in a way that can be a little bit more accessible, because frankly, the complexity of some of the issues that Hawaii's kupuna face can be quite daunting. And so part of my job is to try to make them understandable, accessible, and of course, to assist in the education as well of our own state legislature, which does not always fully understand or appreciate some of the consequences of action or inaction. So a large part of my job is involved in helping to interpret, if you will, and to clarify some of the issues and areas that we're involved in.
It's all about public policy, isn't it?
It very much is a public policy job. I mean, on the one hand, a lot of what I do is advocacy driven, but not everything is public policy or the challenge of our aging society. A lot of it, and I hope we'll have a chance to get into that in the next hour, is about fulfillment and making the most of one's 50 plus years of not necessarily staying on the same track that you were on for much of your life, and of viewing your maturity in a way that's considerably different than the way your parents or grandparents did. And
gee.
We're really, put this in a kind of encapsulated version, we're trying to be true to the proposition that no one's possibilities should ever be limited by their age.
What a wonderful idea.
Yeah.
That is altruistic to the nth degree. It's so community to say that. So what is AARP? It's a national organization. It must be huge on a national level, and it's substantial in Hawaii. As the bell curve, makes the seniors a greater percentage of the population, no?
Well, we could talk all night long about the demographics. We know, for example, that over 500,000 residents in the state of Hawaii are currently over the age of 50. We have a 1.4 million population, so it's about 36% of the population.
Is that higher than other states?
Well, it's comparable. I think what's different about Hawaii, Jay, is that we have greater longevity here in Hawaii, and so that longevity bonus that we enjoy can be put to many different uses and purposes, productive purposes for the most part. The other side of the coin, of course, is, and this is something very much a part of what AARP is working on from an advocacy and education standpoint, we're all about trying to ensure that as people get older, they maintain their health, they maintain their financial circumstances, but in those cases where they can't, that we step in and try to advocate and ensure that policies are in place to make it possible for people to make the best of their circumstances. What I'm trying to say, and to put it a little bit more clearly and concisely, if you're not healthy and if you don't have money as you reach your golden years, you're not going to be in as good a position to enjoy and make the most of those what should be highly productive years. And so that's part of what AARP is about, advocating for people above the age of 50, but also educating folks so that everyone is quite clear and confident in this proposition that my life is not somehow declining after the age of 50, 60, 70, or 80, but really it's a matter of perspective. My age is a number, but it's really about how I see myself. In other words, I'm not aging, I'm living, and I want to make the most of those longer years.
Why do I feel the title of our show is appropriate, Aging with Grace?
Yeah, what I meant to say also, and I forgive me, but there's so much going on in this industry and in this segment of the population that I sometimes can get carried away with my own rhetoric. But we live on average in Hawaii 3 years longer than anywhere else in the country.
Is it?
It's about 82. And so we have that longevity bonus, and the point that we try to make is, what are you going to do with it? You don't want to squander it. You don't want to just say, oh, isn't it great? You want to really embrace it, make the most of it, and as a community, I think, Hawaii is very well positioned, perhaps better positioned than anywhere else in the country, to ensure that its citizens do respect that and make the most of it.
Mm. I wonder though, well, first of all, you represent not only the members, the 150,000 members in the state of Hawaii, but all the people over 50, right? I mean, you're out there advocating and trying to help people who are in the age bracket, not necessarily in the membership bracket, am I right?
Oh, very much so. I mean, we, for example, when you go to our events in the community, we never say that these are exclusive to our members. We always open them up to, because, our membership fee, by the way, is $16 a year, which we consider to be very affordable and modest for what you get in return.
Do you hear that? $16 a year.
Yeah, it really.
I can't think of a better bargain myself.
There aren't too many bargains out there like that, but your point is well taken in that, no, we're not just advocating and educating for our membership. We're advocating for everyone and anyone who believes, as we do, that when you reach the age of 50, that all kinds of opportunities should be open to you. And we want to make people aware of that. That is first and foremost in our minds. I want to say also that here in the AARP Hawaii State Office, our mission is not to think day in and day out about how to increase our membership. We are out in the community advocating, educating, doing community service, and that'll take care of itself. If we do our jobs well, then we're confident that people will see AARP Hawaii as a membership organization that they want to identify with.
Right. Well, I mean, there's strength in numbers, and sometimes the kupuna don't get enough of they don't get the right shake from government. Somebody has to speak for them, and you are the one that comes to mind first.
Well, I'd like to be modest about this, but I think it's safe to say that there aren't that many organizations that give and amplify the voice of Hawaii's elderly community as we do. And we are very, very mindful and respectful of the fact that we are not talking about a homogeneous group. Hawaii is a wonderfully diverse community, and we want to respect the incredible richness and diversity of our population. And so we know, for example, that some of the population will be very much interested in the financial security kind of outreach that we do, sharing with people ideas about what are your Social Security benefits that you've paid into all of your lives? How can you make the most of them as you move forward? How can you understand this complicated program called Medicare so that when you do reach the age of 65, you maximize its benefits?
So I can call you. I can call AARP and get advice on these things, Social Security, Medicare, and the like.
Well, it's not we're not like an office that we do walk-in kind of consultations with people. But one of the unique things I like to think about us is we have a very thoughtful group of volunteers who are very issue conscious, if you will. And so we do trainings with volunteers, and you can call or email our office and request that a volunteer come and give a talk on this. And so we are not drilling down into the really individual kind of complexities that can arise when one, for example, thinks about beginning to collect Social Security. But we provide kind of the nice general overview, and we also are a referral service, so we can tell you where to go to get more specific answers to your questions.
Bruce, we'd like to have some of those volunteers come down and participate in our shows, because it's about aging with grace, and that kind of information and that kind of training, if you will, exposure to the ways you can lead a better life vis-a-vis government benefits, very valuable.
Well, I say thank you. We look at ourselves as a resource, and our volunteers and our members are a really rich and tremendously untapped resource in this community that you're free and welcome to avail yourself of.
Thank you. Bruce Bortorff, Associate State Director of Communications for AARP. AARP working for you. We'll take a short break here on Aging with Grace. We'll be right back.
Aloha, namaskar, and hello. My name is Anu Hittel, and I host a show, Climate Change Beyond Outrage. In it, we go beyond outrage to look at solutions to climate problems facing people, nations, and the world. Join me every Tuesday at 1 o'clock Hawaii Standard Time. See you then.
Aloha, my name is Matt, and this is my co-host Justine, and we are from Hawaii Food and Farmers Series, coming to you every Thursday afternoon at 4 p.m.
The purpose of the show is to bring on Hawaii's farmers, as well as all the other folks, organizations, and individuals that are part of our local food system. We like to get their backstory and history and find out why they're motivated to do the work that they do. And we also like to pick their brain about what they see for the future of local food in Hawaii.
So see us every Thursday at 4 o'clock at Think Tech Hawaii.
Thank you. See you then.
Okay, we're back. We're live. We're here with Bruce Bottorff. He's Associate State Director of Communications of AARP Hawaii. AARP working for you here on Aging with Grace. You know, we have a show on Thursdays every week called Aloha United We Stand. this deals with various beneficiaries of the funds that are distributed by Aloha United Way. And we have learned a lot about sort of the other side of the community, the other side meaning people who need the social safety net. And it has struck me anyway, in these various interviews with various charitable organizations, there are a lot of people over 50 who are in dire straits, who are homeless, who thought they were going to have a retirement and found they weren't, who don't have family or friends to support them, who go homeless sometimes, who have to divest themselves of their property in order to, in order to raise the money in order to live. And I wonder if you have any thoughts or programs that deal with that, with the people who are really disadvantaged in our community in Hawaii.
Well, as we tape this show today, it is the GOP caucus day, March 8th, 2016. And one of the issues that we have been at AARP very eager to have, not only the Republican presidential candidates, but the Democratic presidential candidates take a stand on, is Social Security. Why Social Security? Well, for as long as it's been in existence, AARP has fought to strengthen Social Security for future generations. And it's not the program that it was 80 years ago when it was established. And we recognize now, and many Americans we hope recognize, that the next president of the United States and the next Congress really has to start getting serious about what they're going to do to ensure that Social Security is strong for the future. This is about our kids and our grandkids. It's not necessarily about the current generation. And so when we talk about poverty in Hawaii, we have to think about the impact and the importance of Social Security in the lives of Hawaii residents. For example, the statistics indicate that about half of Hawaii residents above the age of 65 rely on Social Security for approximately 50% of their income, and 25% of Hawaii residents age 65, their sole income in retirement is Social Security. Now, Social Security amounts to the monthly benefit for most Hawaii residents, and this is true across the country, is about $1,300. We had a gentleman come into our office today who told me, unsolicited, that that was approximately what his monthly take-home income was. And so we know that there are a number of people in the community who really rely almost exclusively or very heavily on this important social safety net program for their subsistence, for their existence. It was never intended, Social Security was not, to be the sole source of income for anyone. But in a high cost of living state like this, where obviously money does not stretch as far, particularly in retirement on limited income, as it would elsewhere, this is a place where we have to really be strong and speak up about the program. And so my original point was, AARP has created a website called Take a Stand, 2016 takeastand.org. And if you go to that site, you'll see that it's a real-time feed of where each of the candidates have said their position is on Social Security and what they would do or try to do as leader, as president, to strengthen that program for the future. Keep in mind that if nothing is done, by the time we reach the early 2030s, Americans could be losing up to $10,000 of retirement revenue or income a year if nothing is done. That's the significance and how serious that issue is.
Yeah, if you're taking $1,300 a month out, $10,000, well, that means you lose it all.
Well, of course, keep into account the cost of living or COLA increases and all that, yeah. But yeah, I mean, it can be, we're not talking about that percentage-wise, that significant an increase, but on average, a lot of Americans could end up losing that much.
That's very scary. Now, you said that since the time it was adopted under the Roosevelt administration, which was, I mean, his great legacy, I mean, there were other legacies too.
Yeah.
He saved the country in many ways. But his great legacy was Social Security, and here we are. You said it's not today, it's not what it was. What did you mean by that? How has it declined since the 30s?
Well, what has happened is we have a fewer number of workers in the system, in the workforce, who are essentially putting money in for a growing number of retirees. It's really, from that standpoint, not as sustainable as it was back in the days that President Roosevelt.
Why is that? I mean, what is the demographic process that makes that happen?
Well, we know, of course, that the baby boom generation has had an impact in all kinds of demographic ways, and this is one of those ways. We have a much larger number now of people in the ages from 50 to on. That are included in that baby boom generation, and that means that not as many people are in the workforce providing for them. By the way, it was just a couple of years ago that the Vanguard, what do I want to say? The people, I had something in my mind I want to say about people age 50. I think it was that in 2012 or 2014. The last group of the baby boomers had hit 50. So we're now at that age.
Fully retired.
Yeah, exactly. People born between the years of 1946 to 1964. Well, those born in 64 have now reached 2 years ago the age of 50. So they're already starting to think about collecting, if you will, Social Security.
It's a bubble. It's a bubble on the bell curve.
Yeah.
And so now I understand that more people are taking out than putting in, and that means wherever the reserves are, they're being depleted.
Right. So anyway, I'm not necessarily here to talk about all the ins and outs, but of Social Security, but there have been a number of proposals put forward by very smart people in Washington, D.C. And a couple of years ago, AARP actually commissioned people in left-leaning and conservative-leaning think tanks to come up with their best solutions and then do the pros and cons. And we have a booklet out that I've forgotten the name of it. I was going to bring it out on the table, but anyway, it was called You've Earned a Say at that point. Now we call it Take a Stand. Take a Stand is this site that is dedicated to having the ideas of the presidential candidates put forward. Right, okay.
I love the graphic.
Yeah.
I love the graphic.
So anyway, there is a publication under this moniker of Take a Stand that outlines the 10, call them the most significant or serious proposals that candidates and individuals from all the political spectrum have brought forth. And many of them are known to us, in concept, that is raising the cap and so forth, raising the retirement age. We could spend all night talking about what each individual one would do or not do.
Is there anybody out there that's saying cut it or let it fail?
Well, AARP is not taking a position right now. And the reason we don't is if we were to take a position on any of those ideas, it would immediately we'd become the focal point of the discussion. What we want to do is let the people of this country decide and have the candidates who are running for the highest office in the land make their pledges, if you will, and so that people can gravitate to the candidate they feel is most aligned with their values and their ideas. And that's why we're not jumping ahead of it.
So you're providing a matrix, and I can look at the matrix here and take a stand and decide which of the candidates is making a statement that's most consistent with my requirements, my needs.
What you believe, and just what you believe generally. First, just as an example, some people do not believe that we should raise the retirement age. Now, we know that many people are staying in the workforce, not only here in Hawaii, but across the country, perhaps around the world, staying in the workforce longer because they have to out of financial necessity.
Yeah.
Here in this country, there's also a segment of the population that's staying in the workforce because they want to remain productive and they want to continue to contribute well into their adult, mature years. Excuse me. And so we don't say, for example, that we favor that, but we do certainly celebrate the ability of people, should they decide to do so, to stay in the workforce.
Consistent with your view of trying to extend useful life, trying to extend
Right.
quality of life for
Right.
as long as possible.
And AARP is also a very strong proponent of trying to encourage employers to consider the benefits of your experienced, most knowledgeable, and from our perspective, one of the most valued employees you have are the people who are experienced.
So your view of it would be
They're your knowledge
hold on
base.
to the seniors, they're your knowledge base,
Yeah.
employ them for a long time and hire them.
Yeah.
Hire them to give them another career.
Yeah. But the sad truth is that whether we like to use the word or not, and admit it or not, this thing called age discrimination
Sure.
does exist.
Yeah.
When we went into the Great Recession years, statistically, it became much harder for someone age 50 plus to recoup a job at the salary that they had previously had. Much, much harder for the mature workforce. So that's one of the the things that we're proud of, is advocating for people who cannot otherwise speak for themselves, that mass of people who in that case lost their ability to remain wage productive.
So, okay, take a stand is for kind of a matrix of political statements, and I can see what the candidates have said, and I can make my own decision on it.
Right.
But if a candidate, I mean, I know you guys would like to protect Social Security, because I mean, anybody over 50, or especially over 62 these days, is going to be interested in that retirement. Even people who have lots of money, they still want to get that Social Security. I know it's important to me, and I would hate to see that go, and I would hope that AARP can protect me from any political candidate, or any official for that matter, or any legislative body, elected legislative body that wants to terminate that or reduce it or diminish its funding. And so the question I put to you is, okay, suppose somebody stands up and says, I want to cut Social Security. What would AARP do? Would it simply report that, or would it ultimately take a position and say, wait, this candidate is out of school here?
Take a stand would simply report it. Now, there might come a time, an appropriate time, when we would speak out more strongly against it. But as this program and this initiative currently stands,
Take a Stand initiative.
Take a Stand is about voter education and empowering voters with the knowledge they need to make informed decisions in what we believe is a critical election year. And by the way, AARP, I have to emphasize, is a nonpartisan organization. We do not endorse, we do not contribute to campaigns or officials. That's why we are sought after to sponsor debates here in Hawaii and across the country, because people know that we're very strong issue advocates, but that we are, very, very impartial when it comes to the candidates themselves.
Over time. But you do some lobbying, both nationally and on a state level. And when we come back from this break, Bruce, I'd like to talk about that, and I'd like to talk about the kinds of issues that you're going to get involved in that capacity. That's Bruce Bortorff, Associate State Director, Communications, AARP Hawaii, but he is in fact the Communications Director of the organization. And AARP working for you here on Aging with Grace. We'll be back in 1 minute. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Donna Blanchard. I'm the host of Center Stage here on Think Tech Hawaii. Center Stage airs every Wednesday at 2 o'clock, and of course you can check out our archives on YouTube or on Think Tech Hawaii anytime you like. Why should you do that? Because this is an arts show that I believe is making a difference in lives. We talk with artists of various ilk. We talk with painters and writers, playwrights, novelists, poets, sculptors, dancers, you name it, directors, actors, of course. And we don't only talk about what people do, but we talk about how they do it. And my favorite part of the conversation, we talk about why they do it. And it's really common on this show to hear people say, wow, I didn't think about it that way. And it's very common to hear people afterwards who have seen the show say the same thing. And I hear all the time that people are inspired by the conversations that we have. So why don't you join us and be inspired too? That's Center Stage on Wednesdays at 2 o'clock. We'll see you center stage.
Thank you for putting up the thing.
Okay, we're back. We're live with Bruce Bortorff. He's the Communications Director of AARP Hawaii here on Aging with Grace, talking about how AARP is working for you. So, you know, it strikes me that, that the elderly, the senior citizens in the political process, there's a certain momentum against them because they're retired. They're not actively in the workforce. They're not actively in the political process. And that's where you come in to represent them, to activate them, invigorate them, empower them. Okay? And so there's all these issues, some very threatening issues, threatening to seniors out there. And you've got to get out into the ledge here in the state and on a national level into Congress to make sure that politicians don't take away benefits or don't marginalize the seniors. So I'd like to know what the the infrastructure of that is, how you do that, who does it, and I'd like to know what issues you're concerned with, at least on the state level.
Well, you're right. One of our reasons for being is to mobilize and to engage people who might not otherwise be plugged into the legislative process. And it isn't always an easy process to either understand or to negotiate. And
I've heard that before.
So we do try to organize folks in groups such that we allow their voices to be heard at the legislature. And when you talk about what issues that we're most deeply involved in, for the last 8 to 10 years here in the state of Hawaii, it's really been a very sharp focus on the issue of family caregivers. Why family caregivers? Well, when we think about what unpaid family caregivers do, the contributions that they make to our community and to the family members they help support, it's really quite profound. AARP's Public Policy Institute comes out with statistics from time to time. And the most recent statistics indicate that there are 154,000 family caregivers in Hawaii who provide unpaid care to aging and adult loved ones, valued at $2.1 billion a year. That's with a B. Now, that is not an amount of money, nor a service that can be somehow made up somewhere else. State government can't do it, the federal government can't do it, and so essentially we're relying upon the unpaid labor of these friends and family members who, out of the goodness of their hearts, help bathe, dress, clothe, feed, and transport their loved ones who, as they get older, statistics indicate inevitably, or at least statistically, tend to decline. That is, they need help.
You don't get younger.
That's right. And so what we're trying to do at the state legislature, not only this year, but in past years, is to make sure that our public policymakers understand that this is really and should be a community priority. That without very basic and fundamental and sustained public support of family caregivers, we're going to face some really daunting problems in the years ahead.
Well, it draws productive members of the community, makes them unproductive because they have to be caregivers. But what can the legislature do to support these family caregivers and these families who are in such distress?
Well, I'll give you a couple of examples. We have a state-funded program called Kupuna Care, and Kupuna Care exists for the purpose of funding home and community-based services, which is to say it gives funding to each of the counties, which administers to service providers like Meals on Wheels, Catholic Charities, Child and Family Services, real services that people need so they can stay in their homes longer and don't have to go into much more costly institutions like nursing homes and so forth. And so Kupuna Care is one. But there is something else, and this allows me now to talk about our priority in 2016 that we've been asking the legislature to focus on, and that is something called the CARE Act. What is the CARE Act? Well, the CARE Act recognizes that the complexity of care, the complexity of needs that family members have has grown much more daunting. I already talked.
Expensive.
And expensive. We could spend the whole show talking about the expense side, but let me talk about what caregivers actually do. Traditionally, as I said, they assisted loved ones with clothing, feeding, dressing themselves, bathing, and that sort of thing. They still do that. But as time goes by, our hospital system has not wanted to, acute care hospitals have not wanted to keep patients that are deemed as rehabilitating or convalescing. They have not wanted to keep them in beds that are meant for the incoming patients, so they tend to be discharged home. Well, people don't tend to come out of the hospital, especially elderly people, entirely healed. They go home with wounds that need cleaning. They go home with injections that need administering. They go home with medications that need to be managed, and that can be a daunting prospect in itself. So those three things, wound cleaning, providing injections, administering medications, those are complex activities, quasi-medical activities for which most unpaid family caregivers are simply unprepared to cope. And so what we're asking this year for the state legislature to do is pass Senate Bill 2397, the CARE Act, which would do three fundamental things. And when your listeners or viewers hear this, they'll say, what? They're not already doing that? But that's how common sense this is. Number one, a patient in the hospital should be given the opportunity to designate a family caregiver and say, I want this family member, I want their name on the medical record so that whatever happens to me, they'll be informed. Number two, the patient should have the opportunity to say, I want that caregiver, that designated caregiver, to be notified when I'm discharged home or transferred to another facility. And number three, to the point that I was making about complexity, I want the opportunity for that family caregiver to receive basic instruction in the care the patient will need at home when I go home, so that I can go home safely and that I'm not readmitted 3 or 4 or a week later because my caregiver was not able, because they didn't know how, to do the things that they were given the thick instruction sheet on. That is what we are asking for the legislature to do.
Actually, wouldn't think the statute would be necessary, but here we are when the medical community does not provide that. And it's really too bad.
Well, it is not in a consistent manner.
Yeah.
Which is to say, some hospitals may be providing that type of embracing of the caregiver and of patient-centered care, that type of model in their discharge process. But you'd be surprised, not all hospitals do. And we talk to a lot of people in the community who say, I was just in the hospital last week and I left sort of groggy coming out of whatever treatment I had, and I was I think I was given some instructions on what to do, but when I got home, I wasn't sure about what to do any longer. And so these are the kinds of things we're trying to clear up.
It's not a money bill either. This is not a money bill. There should be no resistance on this bill.
There should not. And indeed, something like 18 to 20 other states across the country have already passed similar measures. None of them, by the way, with an appropriation. And another 20 or so states are now working on similar legislation.
It's a humanitarian thing, an enlightened thing to do.
Yeah, so I mean, it is an example of the kind of thing that AARP has worked on, and we've been working on it now for 3 years in the face of some unexpected, shall we say, opposition from the hospitals.
You mean it's been in the ledge for the last 3 sessions?
Yes, it has.
That's too bad. I mean, who would oppose this? I assume that you have champions who are in or influential in the committees that would hear the bill, but who would oppose it categorically?
Well, without going into too much detail, because you could go out and talk to these folks yourself, but the Healthcare Association of Hawaii, which is
they don't want the burden,
the lobbying arm for many of the hospitals in Hawaii, they have fought this on several fronts, and it's kind of evolved. That is, they've shifted the focus. But at first, it was liability, and we put language in that was drawn from other states that have successfully passed this that really shored up that and didn't make the hospitals any more liable than they already are. And there were a number of other concerns. All of them have been addressed, and now finally this year, the Hospital Association has basically agreed to pass the bill.
Good for you, good for AARP.
Now, there may be still some amendments that we've sought that haven't been made, but we're really trying to make sure that we have a fully clear and bill that is not subject to interpretation later on. And some of that may still need to be cleared up. But we're very gratified and thankful primarily to Speaker Suki, who championed this during his opening day address, and later Senator Roz Baker, the now chair of the Senate Consumer Protection, Commerce, and Health Committee.
Good. There's a bill in the ledge now on dignity, death with dignity. It's been there before.
Yeah.
How many times? Probably on and off 10 years anyway. Where do you stand on that? Are you taking a position on that? Are you expressing any view of that?
AARP has not taken a position on that bill because, frankly, that is one of those things that will have to play out in society before AARP positions itself. The moment AARP positions itself, of course, all the arrows and stones will fly one way or the other.
Yeah.
It's better for things to run their course, and we certainly can understand feelings on both sides of this important issue. But right now, we're not taking a position on it.
One last question, because we're running out of time here. You've described the situation in the CARE Act, or the CARE Bill, I hope it passes.
Thank you.
Where, the person, the senior, has a caregiver. But there are many seniors out there that don't have a family member.
Right.
They're alone. Maybe one of two spouses, is not competent. They have no money. How, if at all, would this bill help them? And is there any other bill that would help them? Because I think the most, really tragic thing that happens is a husband-wife gets old, and then there's a survivor of the two, and there's no family. Maybe they emigrated here years and years ago from the mainland, and they're very Hawaii, but they don't have a family here. And it's very tragic to see what happens when they get into their elder years. What are you doing on that score?
Well, the CARE Act is not going to be a panacea for everybody in the community. We're talking about one step that can be taken to ease the transfer of patients from hospital to home. But in the case, and in the broader context such as you're describing, of large numbers of people in the community who face growing older in potential isolation, who face the potential of growing older without the resources or the health needed to live a fulfilled life.
Big problem.
We believe, AARP believes, that this is something that really has to begin with the state and the city leaders coming together and saying aging and our elderly are significant issues in the community that must be made a priority, notwithstanding all of the other priorities that can arguably be put on the table as well. But let's face it, we're talking about 1 in 5, 1 in 4 residents in our community, not all of whom, of course, will face the kinds of dire needs that we've suggested, but many of them will. And while aging itself should not be regarded as a disability, growing older without proper public supports in place is something that we should all be very, very concerned about. And so we need leadership from the State Executive Office on Aging, we need leadership from the Governor's Office, and we need leadership from state legislators themselves, recognizing that the state probably should and must do more. Because if we don't, Jay, we're talking about a bigger draw on public
Absolutely.
resources down the line in the form of Medicaid and other vital services.
Absolutely. If we don't handle this issue, we'll pay for it out the
Very
other
much
side,
so,
be much
yeah.
more expensive. That's Bruce Bottorff, Director of Communications for AARP Hawaii. AARP Hawaii working for us. Thank you so much, Bruce.
Thank you, Jay, for having me.
This is the first of other conversations, right? We're not stopping here.
There's plenty to talk about from here.
Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you.
Aloha.
Thank you.
Bruce, thanks for joining